Musical Talk, the UK independent musical theatre podcast.
Welcome to Musical Talk. My name is Mae West. I'm the girl who works for Paramount in the day and Fox all night. Actually, I'm Tim Sayward, but I'm sure you were fooled as I introduced this episode. This episode of Musical Talk, welcome to that, by the way, is about a very unusual musical. Quite some time ago, some years now, in fact, ago, Thos and I, Thos is here, hello Thos.
Hello, Tim, or May, as I may call you.
Exactly, we did an episode, of course, very interesting about Mae West. She went west, didn't she? As we're about to discover. We did an episode a while ago about the 5,000 Fingers of Dr. Teal. We did an item on it, which I think at the time I described as probably one of the worst musicals I'd ever seen. But fun, but very fun to watch and very camp and nonsensical. However, there is another contender for this crown because we've recently watched, not for the first time, I have to say, the marvellous Sextette, which is a 1978 film starring and also written by Mae West, who at the time was
84.
Was 84. Wow. Okay. But she still plays the romantic lead in it, doesn't she?
I think romantic lead is polite. Sex kitten.
Yes.
Quite a big kitten.
So I think you're beginning to see, listeners, what the first sort of general error that was made by the production team was that they cast Mae West, aged 84, as the sex kitten of the thing. It's an adaptation of a play that she actually wrote,
which did appear on Broadway.
And it's a bit of a runaround, isn't it?
Yeah.
If you can imagine it being done on stage, actually, as a sort of very conventional Broadway comedy, basically, comedy play. But they decided, let's scale this up, for reasons best known to themselves.
Profit.
Oh, that was it. And make a big musical out of this, but let's use some existing songs and... well, where should we start with Sextette?
It is certainly an example of a jukebox musical.
Yes, okay.
But let us start with the opening theme tune. Would you care to read out some of the lyrics? It's a specially written song.
Yes,
it's one of the few specially written songs for the piece.
A specially written song. So it goes, Marlowe, the female answer to Apollo, as lovely as Venus de Milo or Milo, I'm not sure. A living dream, Marlowe, you are the promise of tomorrow, for you are the rainbow that we follow across the silver screen.
Now, Marlowe is the name of the character. She plays Marlowe Manners, does Mae West. And as Tim has beautifully intoned from the delightful lyrics, there's a rather... bearing in mind she's 84, she's identified as the promise of tomorrow.
The promise of what tomorrow, they don't say, but...
But in a way, that sums up the film overall, because it is a good example of optimism over practicality.
Now, one of the things that's particularly remarkable about this, as with many flops or cult musicals, feature people like Rocky Horror, for example, feature people who weren't particularly well known at the time the film was made because they couldn't really get massive names, at the time. And so Tim Curry became famous with Rocky Horror rather than being famous at the time that it was made, I think it's fair to say. But this one is crammed full of stars who certainly already were quite well known. Timothy Dalton, perhaps least of all, actually, who had, however, performed with the RSC by this time and was established. Obviously, he hadn't been.
But that says immediately Royal Shakespeare Company.
Yes,
good British actor,
solid British,
solid.
Yes, Dom DeLuise, a comic performer, and this is where we start getting into the big stars. Tony Curtis is in it. Obviously famous, of course, not least for Some Like It Hot. Ringo Starr, famous, of course, as the drummer of the Beatles. Not only him, but also Keith Moon, who was the drummer for The Who. Both appear in quite remarkable cameos, I think it's fair to say. We've got George Hamilton, Van McCoy, Walter Pidgeon, a veteran actor by this time and certainly extremely famous.
And often playing British-style characters. He was a husband in Mrs. Miniver, which is a good wartime morale-boosting piece.
Yep.
So this is his last film.
We've got George Raft, who shows up for a very brief cameo indeed.
Also his last film.
Indeed. And then, perhaps most bizarrely of all, another pop performer or rock performer is Alice Cooper, who, this must be the only time when he crosses over with the world line of Mae West. By this time, for 10 years already, he'd been he'd basically invented sort of goth rock, really, basically, and or heavy metal. But he pops in to do, a Bernie Taupin number during this.
Yes, it's very
and plays a bellboy.
It's non-characteristic, isn't it, for him?
Yes, it's very pushing against typecasting.
We should talk very briefly about George Raft, actually, because, as you say, George Raft has a tiny little cameo in it, and he's a very famous American actor.
As himself, pretty much, isn't he?
Well, he does, yeah. But it's a return favour. because George Raft employed Mae West in her first film in 1932. It was called Night After Night.
Right.
She had this tiny little role, and she didn't really like it. She didn't think it was... because she was already a star on stage.
Yeah.
But she thought that she could do rather better. So she didn't really like the role she'd been cast in. But George Raft then said, well, you can rewrite the words that you've got to say to suit your character. Okay. And because she was a writer. I mean, the thing about Mae West is that actually she was a very accomplished writer of screenplays and shows. She's a very, very accomplished woman, particularly for the 20s and 30s. When you weren't given that opportunity, she sort of broke the boundaries. She's quite important in that sense, and we might touch on that in a minute.
Parker,
So she wrote her own words. And, of course, this is her famous aphorism, and there's so many, but her first one... She wrote herself in this scene where a hat check girl exclaims, "Goodness, what beautiful diamonds," to Mae West, in which response she gets, "Goodness had nothing to do with it, dearie."
Yes. Which is a famous line, isn't it?
And it's hers, and she invented it. And George Raft later said she stole everything but the cameras, which is pretty fair. Yeah. But it's rather nice circularity that both Mae West and George Raft's last film return the favour that he gave her in the first place. I think it's rather nice.
But this isn't why this film is famous, is it?
That is not
why Sextette is famous is because it has a ludicrous plot. It has some of the worst landing songs in the history of musicals.
It's a musical, which is why we're interested.
Yes, and many of these songs just sort of pop up really in random sort of intervals. So let's take a couple of examples. I think probably the most famous one is "Love Will Keep Us Together," which was a Neil Sedaka song, popular in the 70s. Not terribly popular now.
It's popular with me.
Oh, well, okay, fine. Well, not my kind of thing.
It's popular with my father, and he's in his 70s.
But if you Google YouTube, Timothy Dalton, Mae West, the chances are you will come up with and this rendition of "Love Will Keep Us Together."
Would you care to describe it?
Stilted, I think, is how I describe it on the part of Timothy Dalton, and actually on the part of Mae West as well.
But the narrative is that he and she have just married that day.
Yes, that's
He
right.
is Sir Michael Barrington.
Yes, a very senior.
He's 32,
toff, basically. Yes,
she's 84. She is 52 years older than her bride.
They don't really make much of that, do they? But yes,
I don't think they'll make much of anything, to be honest. But it's a farce.
Yeah.
The whole piece is really about, will he ever get her to bed? Will she ever get him to bed?
Yeah.
Because she keeps being sort of pulled away for other events, and he keeps being pulled away deliberately in order to give her a chance to go off and do these other bits and pieces, include save the world.
Exactly. Yes.
But on these rare occasions when they do meet up in their lounge, in their bedroom, they're in the bridal suite.
Yes.
In a room with a double bed shaped like a gold swan.
Yes, indeed.
They do occasionally, they are supposed to be genuinely in love. It's not a sham marriage, and he. She's saying, "I'll never get to see you. I never get to spend any time with you." And he starts to intone, speaking.
Yes. Love will keep us together.
Yeah.
Think of me, babe, whenever some sweet guy comes along singing his song, and then the backing track kicks in like an immense speed at that time.
It's a real lurch.
Stop, says she, meaning it, I think, at that point. And the other lovely thing is that Mae West, at 84, she's not much of a mover at that stage. I mean, there's this massive Hollywood, in fact, it's hooray for Hollywood, quite early on.
Yes.
Somebody, and the cue for this, by the way, is that she's obviously a Hollywood star. That's the entire relevance of the song. She turns up, and then some random person shouts, "Hooray for Hollywood!" And then they all launch into it. All of the men from the hotel,
except Mae West.
Except Mae West.
As you say, it's in a huge lobby.
And all the bellboys. All the bellboys do a sort of Hello Dolly style routine where they swirl around her and laud her and magnify her.
Well, she sort of staggers off very slowly.
And she does. She moves very slowly across the screen on what look like two fairly dodgy hips.
But what's rather...
And disappears stage right.
But the thing about this Hooray for Hollywood is that it's a famous song from the 30s.
Yes.
What you don't get is any of the lyrics.
No, they go "Hooray for Hollywood."
Na, 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 nothing else. Na, na, na. And then occasionally again when that bit comes up, they then shout "Hooray for Hollywood" again.
Yes.
So it's not really a song; it's done as an incidental piece. But as you say, it's a big Busby Berkeley kind of choreographed number.
It all means nothing.
The bellboys are doing tap dancing.
Yes.
On the stairs.
Yes.
The stairs which are carpeted.
Oh. Some set designer must have got fired for that one, although presumably, I don't know, really.
Yeah, I don't think so, no, not at all. But it's interesting. It's
possibly argue like firing the cleaners on the Titanic, I suppose.
I like that.
Water everywhere here. You're
Mop
fired.
this up. No, seriously. So you've got, but it's a very impressive piece. Bizarrely, it's awful because you suddenly think this is remarkably cheesy, and yet at the same time they are all putting in their worth in the dancing.
So that's hooray for Hollywood and its limited relevance. Now, before we go on to discuss some of the other things, we should probably just sort of talk about the general plot and who else is in the hotel at this time, because this is kind of
commercial
relevant.
hotel. It's a a hotel off the street. It's supposed to be one of Britain's
top
grandest hotels.
Yes. There's an international peace conference going on featuring world leaders from pretty much every nation that Hollywood can come up with a costume for,
including Jimmy Carter, then President of America.
Yes, it's someone who looks very like Jimmy Carter indeed. And that's
chaired by Walter Pidgeon, who's the British, even though he's an American actor, he's plays the British chairman of this authority.
That's right. We've got, for various reasons that I don't think we ever really discover, Marlowe's previous husbands, at least number 3, 4 and 5. I'm not sure if any of the others, the first two, turn up. But
we're all in the building.
But those we've got, there's Tony Curtis, who is actually a Russian diplomat known as Sexy Alexei. There's Ringo Starr playing.
Well, he's a film director. He's a film director, and one of the reasons it's briefly touched on that Marlowe isn't being able to give all her time to her new husband is the fact that for some reason or other she's about to start filming.
Test, that's right.
Yeah, she's going to be filming a new film shortly, and
directed by this former husband, Ringo Starr.
The studio have demanded that she does a screen test and a costume fitting. It should be said.
Yes.
That afternoon, even though it's her wedding afternoon.
Yes, weird.
Anyway, so that's why Timothy Dalton's character has to be kept away.
That's right. So
that's Ringo Starr's character. He's doing the screen test with
We've got the Keith Moon character, who's
a dresser. He's the dresser.
He's the dresser, so he does the costume fitting. He's another former husband, isn't he? Oh, I'm not sure.
I didn't get that impression. He was playing a very gay man.
Then we have, that's true actually, and then we have an Italian gangster basically who is her immediately previous husband, who it turns out wasn't dead as she had believed, but in fact
with hilarious complications.
With hilarious consequences, yes, exactly. And then this new British husband that she's got, who also turns out in another brilliant twist to be working secretly for the civil service and actually
secret service.
Yes, sorry, what did I say?
Civil service.
Oh yes, working secretly for the civil service. Well, we all actually.
He's a spy. He's a British spy.
He's a British spy. Hence, of course, he later played James Bond, didn't he?
Yeah. And indeed, 007 is mentioned in an immortal line about. Can I just quickly give you the line?
Yes.
Right towards the end, Sir Michael Barrington is described by the Dom DeLuise character as bigger than 007, leaving Marlowe to say, "I never got a chance to take his measurements." Yes.
Anyway,
as thrilling as it sounds.
So, and all of this peace conference will collapse. It is intimated if Marlowe Manners' cassette autobiography or memoirs fall into the hands of the conference, because they'll all realise that she slept with every last man jack of them.
On behalf of America.
On behalf of America,
because
she was working for the CIA herself.
Yeah.
That's right.
She keeps them all sweet.
I hope you're following this at home.
Well, they're not the only visitors to the hotel, are they?
No.
Because there's also, as if all of that weren't enough, there's also an Olympic team of some kind. Well, athletics team. Yeah, they're American. They seem to be all sports.
Yes.
Because they've got a javelin, a trampoline,
all kinds of things.
And the most amazing haircuts.
Yes.
But we'll talk about them in a minute.
Well, let's talk about them now, actually.
All right, let's talk about them now.
Because now we've set all that up, we can talk safely about this here. So, Marlowe Manners, in pursuit of this cassette that's gone missing that is a threat to world peace, a lovely pink cassette that she records.
At one stage baked in a cake, but escapes from the cake, gets thrown onto it ends up on a javelin.
Yes, thrown by one of the sports team, and then the next time we see it, the javelin guy is sitting on the edge of the trampoline with his javelin sticking over his shoulder very dangerously,
whilst the man's jumping on the trampoline,
and it falls off onto the trampoline.
That's the cassette. Yeah.
Marlowe arrives. There's a big sort of very camp number, Happy Birthday 21, adapted from Happy Birthday Sweet 16, which she sings for no readily apparent reason to the youngest member of the team, basically, who has an extremely unfortunate late 70s hairdo.
Yeah, he'd be very attractive if he wasn't covered in a haystack.
Exactly, yeah. Yes, it's sort of, I mean, if you imagine Matthew Broderick in Torch Song Trilogy and, multiply that by 7.
With the same hairdresser that Divine has in Hairspray.
Yes, that's right, yes, that sort of a thing. So, yes, she hymns him, and they all hymn her, and as it were, and... him and hers. Then the trampolinist jumps up and down a couple of times, and the cassette, which is up to this point has been sitting perfectly happily on the trampoline, just bouncing up and down a little bit,
yeah.
is catapulted
in defiance of all gravity,
70 metres into the air, and carefully lands in the mouth of a stone lion.
A gargoyle, basically, on the side of the hotel's higher regions. But let's just talk about the song.
Yes.
Happy Birthday, Sweet 16.
20 or 21 in this case, yes.
Another Neil Sedaka number again. Apparently, the reason it was changed from 16 to 21 is because I just sit for a second and enjoy the thinking behind this. Mm-hmm. It was thought inappropriate for the 84-year-old Mae West to be singing a song of a faintly romantic or sexual nature to a 16-year-old,
right? But
perfectly fine,
that's fine
if he was 21.
Yes.
The problem is it does require new lyrics, and so new lyrics were provided, or some changes were made to the lyrics.
Yes, there are assorted ones where she says, in fact, when you were Sweet 16, you were just a little boy, or whatever. I don't know what it actually says, but, But now you're 21.
But the new lyrics were by somebody called Ian Whitcomb. Now, Ian Whitcomb had one hit in the 1960s as a pop singer, but then immediately went into classic music hall and vaudeville numbers. He's a British singer and performer. Yeah. He does a lot of work with banjolalis and novelty numbers from the 1920s.
God someone's doing that.
And so he was called in to rewrite the lyrics in order to make them more appropriate for a 21-year-old. Okay. But we'll be speaking more about Ian Whitcomb.
Sporking with him.
We'll be sporking later. We'll be speaking a little more of Ian Whitcomb later in the programme because he does come up in Mae West story again.
Okay, all right, we'll come back to him. Should we talk about...
Can I just make one further observation for something? These are all trailers for later in the programme. The other thing about the gymnastics team is that actually half the men are in no way gymnasts. They spend a lot of their time taking off their tops. Several people stand by. They're muscle men. And indeed, if you read the closing credits, they are all Mr. Universes and Mr. Pennsylvania.
Okay.
So they're not genuine sportsmen in a physical sense. They're posing, which is exactly the Mae West thing.
Yes, exactly. Up to my neck and muscle.
And we'll be all that meat and no potatoes was also stated.
That's right, yes.
But which is a song by Thomas Fats Waller, by the way, from the 1930s. But we'll be talking about muscle men in Mae West's life later on as well.
Well, you said that, Fat Swallow. It just suddenly sounded different to me.
A fat swallow.
Yeah. Anyway.
As opposed to a huge turkey, which is what we've been talking about.
Exactly. So, do we know... So hopefully we've given a slight flavour of the thing. I mean, obviously we'll talk more about the content and some of the other songs and why they're all utterly disastrous a bit later on. But that's roughly what it is. It's a runaround comedy that's had some musical numbers chosen pretty much at random and jammed any which way into it with an 84-year-old star. Why did this happen? Do we know anything about the production history of this, such that we can understand why?
Not obviously.
Okay.
It's very... I mean, let's talk... I mean, the film itself was received very badly and was a big flop at the box office. But
fair enough.
There was a huge cult of Mae West developing.
Right.
And clearly somebody thought they might be able to cash in on that. So what was bizarre was, although it was a huge failure, the Mae West fans came out in droves for it. And a lot of them were young people. Yeah. Rediscovering the camp. Because by the 60s and 70s, a lot of... speech marks, straight stars of the past were reinterpreted in a camp way. Indeed, as is in Stephen Sondheim's "I'm Still Here." That's it happens to the central character in that. And Batman had all occurred only 10, 15 years ago. So we're still in that phase. So I think that they're she's a true icon of the 30s, and of course, significantly, she was a very early feminist in some senses. She was writing her own stuff. She was talking overtly about sex, straight sex and gay sex. She didn't have any truck with racial discrimination in America.
No, she was very modern.
There's a fantastic story later on, quite late in her life. She had an amorous fling with a black American bodybuilder. Yeah. And they went to a hotel together, and there was discrimination against him.
Oh, right. Okay.
So she resolved the situation then and there by buying the building.
Wow.
That's a certain kind of class. But it's talk about putting your money where your mouth is.
Yes, absolutely.
But that's entirely to be recommended. She's oddly very profoundly liberal.
Yes, well, yeah, I guess that's not too surprising. She plays up the southern thing, as you say, but it's not at all typical of some of her era from that particular place. But
as to what it looked like, because it's a cheap film, it looks like a cheap buck film.
Yes.
Someone said, let's get Mae West in. It'll be a hoot. It'll become a cult classic.
And then just, yes, exactly. We'll choose.
And then we'll coin it in, but they didn't.
Some big stars as well to be in it. Do we know if it made its money back, or presumably not? I'm guessing.
I don't know the details. It's there's not that much about it online, so it's quite difficult to research.
She does use it as an opportunity to sort of restate a lot of her sort of well-known lines, doesn't she?
Well, she's the queen of the aphorism, isn't she? The one-liner, the epigram. She's the Oscar Wilde, if you like, but sexually and female.
Yes.
Yes, and so many of the lines are her original lines from her films in the 30s.
Yes, exactly.
She doesn't actually say, come up and see me sometime.
No, but yes, exactly. But there's not the men in my life, but the life in my men.
Yes.
And there's assorted other sort of well-known things that she's famous for saying.
Well, here's just a selection of some of the things she says. The reporter says to her at the beginning, just as she enters the hotel, "How do you like it in London, Marlowe?" To which she replies, "I like it anywhere."
She also says, "Marriage is like a book. The whole story takes place between the covers."
And you've already opened with the extremely rude line about working for Paramount and Fox.
Yes, indeed, yes.
Apparently, that was from a scene they had to tone down for the film, so one wonders what...
Hard to imagine what they could have said that was more explicit than that, but there we are.
And then there's a very funny thing about...
yes,
the Ringo
right.
Starr's character is called Lubitsch.
But I forgave him everything. He was such a wonderful director, very much like Lubitsch. In fact, they call him Son of Lubitsch. At least that's what it sounded like.
And there's a lovely line later on when that she's being threatened by the gangster husband number 5, and he knocks on the door, and her sort of assistant, who's the Dom DeLuise character, he says, "Who's that?" And she says, "Well, it ain't opportunity."
And yet, somehow, this is all to no effect whatsoever.
Well, yes, I mean, it's odd. It's a bad film, but it's a good bad film. It's not. It's not a dull film.
No.
You can get a lot out of it if you choose to, and we did.
Yes, indeed.
But something you observed when we were watching it, actually, was the sound mixing.
Yes.
You might like to comment
Very
on that.
poor.
It's
So we talked already about the fact that the way that the accompanying... Normally, when you do a musical, the way, and I'd assume in this case that may well have been how it was done, you have you pre-record the accompanying tracks. You may pre-record the actual... in fact, you would pre-record the vocal track as well. Yes, in fact. So you basically have got those things there before you even start filming the actual scenes. And then in the scenes, they play back the what you're going to be singing along to, and the character, the actor, mimes to that.
Yeah, lip syncs.
Lip syncs to it, exactly. And then they, it all is beautifully sewn together, and a brand new sort of ambient soundtrack is put together, a Foley edit, as they call it, and there's your song basically, and it should, in theory, if you get it right, it should flow seamlessly from the ambient noise that you've got in the scene where you record the dialogue, and what you actually say on the set is what you hear, to the bit where you slip into the pre-recorded stuff. And it certainly is a feature of a lot of musicals, actually, particularly older ones. You notice there is a bit of a difference. They're much closer to the mic when they're singing and stuff like that. It seems a little bit unrealistic. You definitely get that in 5,000 Things of Dr. T, actually, quite a lot as well. And here, it's amazing. It's like the last 50 years of musical theatre
rolled back.
Yeah, musical filmmaking, rather, have never been learned, because the tracks are really poppy-style tracks anyway, which aren't...
It's disco. It's 78. It's 97.
It is.
And they're all
they're
orchestrated.
disco arrangements,
Yeah,
exactly.
they absolutely are.
With mainly live instruments, but also some sort of electronic, I think. I may be wrong about that. But there's no middle missing from them, so that there's room for a vocalist. And... therefore, in order for you to hear the vocal, they have to turn the vocal up very high and the track down very low, with the result that there's no sort of energy coming from the track, because it's sort of chunkering away there, but it's very quiet.
It's a bed rather than a support.
So yes, as it were, as Mae West herself probably might have said at the time. So it's enormously unsuccessful. And not only that, but of course they then have the problem with that none of the introductions work in that traditional musical theatre way. Cole Porter was very good at it, wasn't he? So there's 4 sort of lines done ad lib speed, where you sort of get into the thing, or like in Sign, for example, in Annie's a good example of a good favourite song of mine. You ever been to Buenos Aires? A hunger for the Argentine, but before you get into the rhythmic part, there's a little bit, I make a very dry martini, pause,
and
just
off we go.
And then you gradually get into the song.
There's an easement from dialogue to
But the
song.
only time they attempt it completely sort of fails, really. It's like someone starting up a motorcycle and it going off at twice the speed you expected it to.
Which is the Love Will Keep Us Together
Love Will Keep Us
masterpiece.
Together. And half of the rest of the time they don't even bother with that, really. So, for example, Babyface, which is which Mae West sings to all of the delegates in the thing.
Peace conference.
She, first of all, crowbars the song in by just sort of bridging. So she starts by saying, you all love me, and remember what it is that made you fall in love with me in the first place. And that is the cue for her to sing, it was my baby face. I think she didn't even do it that elegantly. I think she just starts, baby face.
Which, ironically, she doesn't have, because she's obviously had a few lifts.
She's 84.
Yes.
She has a maybe face at that stage.
Very good.
Fair to say.
But it's also, regrettably, the song where you can see
the
lip syncing failing.
Yes.
More than anywhere else. Actually.
Exactly.
You can see her waiting for. She's waiting for the pre-record to catch up with where she is.
Yes.
So there's a slightly awkward.
I get the impression that maybe they did record some of those vocals live on set then, actually, and then they had to sort of mix all that together. I don't know. That would be an interesting thing to go into in another occasion when we're being a bit geekier than we are today. But there's Mae West.
As you say, she does sing it to the delegates of the essentially the United Nations for no obvious reason, and it all seems to pacify them. They for no reason or other have found world peace.
Yeah.
But it's all about to be thrown away because they then decide to have what I think is known as a potluck party,
yes.
where for some reason or other they all bring their national dish to the table.
That's right, yes.
And obviously everyone gets deeply offended because they discover they're eating frog's legs or pork and they're not allowed to.
Well, there's an Israeli, I assume, delegate who is terribly offended because a sheikh has offered him pork. But you know what?
This would be an Arab
Muslims
sheikh.
also don't eat pork.
Yes. Not a researched piece,
No,
I think.
I don't think so.
Yes, they threw all the truth away in that moment.
They did.
Anyway, so she comes in and saves the conference by singing Babyface to them.
Yes, and it works, doesn't it? They just cut away from that scene, and we assume that that's won everybody over. They don't really go into how, but whatever. I mean, who cares?
And that,
power of comedy.
Pretty much the last we see of the delegates.
It is actually. That sort of stops then at that point.
There's their story.
So the Third World War is averted. Should you ever need you at home to avert the Third World War, the best method is to sing Babyface at as many international leaders as you can get into one room. That's what I recommend, and then swivel off on your old hips that barely work.
But should we talk about what's really good about the piece?
No.
No, we should, because actually, although poor old Mae is struggling, she can't walk very fast.
Yes.
She's relying a little bit on fairly tired material. She is actually surrounded by... One or two of the cameos are quite poor. George Hamilton, I'm sorry to say, is rubbish.
Yes.
But actually... Dom DeLuise, we both agreed, really worked wonders with the thin material he was given, and it's all he's doing eye performances and action and reaction shots, and he's retired. He's her valet.
This is a man who belongs in Mel Brooks films, really, and would have done marvelous things in them, but unfortunately he was in this one instead.
Yes, but he puts in a really good performance. And Ringo Starr's cameo is actually very effective because he's going for it, as is Keith Moon.
It's not bad.
And not subtle. It's not subtle.
It's not subtle, but I mean, I suppose the other thing with Ringo Starr's, he does act, certainly, and he certainly doesn't, fail to act.
There was one failing, wasn't there?
Yes, there was one significant failing, which of course is that Lubitsch, I assume he's meant to be the Russian or...
he's German or Russian.
Some sort of Polish, perhaps, I don't know. He speaks with a... Well,
he's European in some way.
But in fact speaks with a regular Scouse accent.
Well, it keeps coming out, doesn't it?
Well, he keeps it up for about the first two lines that he does in the film, and then pretty much the rest of it is largely Scouse. Thanks very much, Ringo. And off you go and do Thomas the Tank Engine instead. That's your future.
But I'm not going to hear the criticism because actually I think he's pitched it exactly right for the film. He's at the level of energy required, as is Keith Moon, playing a gay dresser.
Brilliant performance. Keith Moon actually died very soon after making the film. He died of a big drug overdose and
could be suicide.
Possibly, yes. That's the end of my career, anyway.
So there's
Keith Moon, incidentally, famous for trashing hotel rooms normally, and in fact in this he just goes in and foofs around in one for a while.
Decorates her and him. Yeah.
It's ironic with him because Alice Cooper as well, the famous Killing a Live Chicken on Stage sort of performer, supposedly in the past, and with the
face
the
makeup
band,
and big hair.
Makeup, yes, exactly. And all this horror emphasis, and he comes in this very cheesy hairdo and does a very cheesy.
Well, he's a
song.
bellboy, isn't he?
He's a bellboy,
and then he sings, as you say, a Bernie
Taupin cheesy old song.
He
don't really know why. Again.
It's a song called Next.
Yes,
it's by somebody called Van McCoy.
Oh, okay.
But it's the subtitle of the song apparently is she's blown her chance with you, or he's blown her chance.
Yes, that's right.
Because it's just at the stage at the end, funnily enough. It's the last significant song in the piece.
Yeah.
It's, if you like, your torch song, because Sir Michael's walked out.
Van McCoy is actually in the film as well.
Yes.
I noticed. But, and again, it's one of those ones where he just gets into it with one bound, as it were,
he sits at the piano, doesn't he?
He just sort of sits about it. Never mind, Miss Manners. You don't have to worry, and do you know why?
Yeah.
And off we go into the song.
But it's actually a very nice tune. And he's played on... Well, no, right, but within the context of the piece, it tinkles along. It's not an Alice Cooper number, that's the point.
That's certainly true.
It's a much more middle-of-the-road
which is what had come out also the same year, actually.
And it's... and he plays it on a glass piano.
He does. I thought he was better in Wayne's World. I mean, I have to say.
Fair enough. Comparing musicals.
Yes. Sort of.
But let us take us back to Dom DeLuise, who we were both impressed by in this.
Yes.
He also gets a song, doesn't he? He gets Honey Pie.
Oh my God, he does. I'd
for
forgotten
no
about that.
obvious reason. And he sings it to a cutout.
Yes, he does.
A life-size cutout of Mae West.
Yes, that's true. He does. Yes, he has to. She's running him round. I mean, the premise, just about the excuse for the song, is that she's running him around and getting married and making his life much more difficult as her sort of PA. And that's right. He then starts singing the Honey Pie. Now, those of you who don't know this, because it's not a particularly well-known musical theatre song, but it is from the White Album by the Beatles. I wonder if they possibly directly negotiated the rights with Ringo Starr in this particular case. Although it's written by Paul McCartney, actually, and performed by Paul McCartney normally. And actually, it's a 20s pastiche thing. In fact, it could almost have referred to the likes of Mae West, or perhaps
the first time round.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So I suppose in that sense it's appropriate. But he just has to do the whole routine all by himself.
Yeah, there's no one else in it.
It's the sort of song that normally in a musical you'd be singing it to the person who's caused you all the difficulties, and he just sings it to himself, as you say, to a cardboard cutout of Mae West.
But it's interesting as well because there's so many little plot points which are sort of thrown in for one item and then thrown away. So we discover that Sir Michael Barrington is a spy for no obvious reason at the end.
No, that's true.
We discover that it's suggested at this moment that the PA, Dom DeLuise's character, is actually in love with Mae West.
Oh, that's right. It is. Yeah.
He's suddenly, he's the Buttons character to her Cinderella, if you like. So he leaves her room and he comes out into the foyer where the glass piano is. He then sings on his own to this cardboard cutout, suggestion being that Mae wasn't well enough to do all the scenes herself.
I suspect.
So it's a very odd piece. I didn't know the song at all.
No.
But I have to say, bearing in mind it is him just on his own and he's no Fred Astaire, he does a fairly good fist of it.
Although I have to say the tap dancing thing, I always think is a good thing in a tap routine for the way, where the taps fall should be somewhere on the beat at all possible, or on the off beats, but not sort of just randomly spaced in between the beginning and the end of the song.
Well, they do that lovely moment where he climbs on top of his glass piano to do a tap dance routine, and then they cut to the knees up shot.
Yes, indeed.
I have a feeling that his feet were in no way involved.
Whilst the sound of a metal hailstorm goes on. It's just very strange.
Someone goes mad in a riveting factory.
Yes, in fact, I think somebody just sort of got some wrapping paper and just going next to a microphone in order to achieve that particular effect. Yes, it's a very, very strange film. And one of the sad things about it is obviously the last one that Mae West did. And Keith Moon, as we've said, and also Raft, the George Raft, and Walter Pidgeon as well. It's swan song for every last one of them, and
a pigeon song for one of them.
A pigeon song in my case, yes, exactly. Which is a shame, really, because obviously it's awful. And, who wants to have that as their last credit?
Yeah, well, you see, I'm much warmer to it than a lot of people. But there's one song we haven't touched on yet. And incidentally, we ought to mention, on the Happy Birthday Suite 21/16, there's also the choir invisible.
Oh, yes.
Mae West is singing it. And and bearing in mind, she's the only woman in a room full of scantily clad, naked muscle men.
Yes.
As she's singing Happy Birthday 21, there's a backing chorus of clearly recorded female singers who were clearly not in the room. But there's one song we haven't mentioned, which is the Tony Curtis song.
Oh, yes.
Which is After You've Gone, which is a famous 1920s standard.
Just sort of lands in that scene.
And he's doing it for the Russian, a very lovely cod, the Russian accent.
We don't really know why that song happens. I don't know why any of it happened.
But he's still... this is actually plot relevant, though, so pay attention with your notebooks here. Right. His character is refusing to agree to the peace conference proposals. He's the only one still saying niet when everyone else is saying yes. Mm-hmm. And he's only prepared to say yes. He's prepared to cut a deal with the CIA to give them a yes if he can spend one more night with his former wife, with whom he's still in love.
That's right.
That's right, Marlowe Manners.
Yes.
And she's in the hotel.
Yes.
So when so she reluctantly agrees for America, for old glory.
Yes.
And so she slowly walks into his room, very slowly, and he's in there.
Sits down. She manages to sit down, actually.
She does.
Without any obvious ill effects.
We never see her stand up again, though.
No.
Anyway, and so Tony Curtis is waiting for her. He's left the conference in order to have his night of passion, or so he hopes. And, of course, he sings After You've Gone and Left Me Crying. So it's a song of lamentation, but he's no longer her husband. So, in fact, it's very real.
Yeah. Nice.
Some thoughts.
And he throws the champagne glasses out. That's his sort of shtick, isn't it?
He pours 2 glasses of champagne. It looks like he's about to give her one, and then he drinks both and throws them away.
As it were, yes.
Yes, as it were.
Yes, we've got some reviews here that came in shortly afterwards, in case anybody was in suspense after having seen the film as to whether the critics would agree.
Would love it.
It was terrible. They didn't, is the short answer. It's described in the following terms.
Caustic?
For example, yes, caustic as well. For example, a fiasco in which the poor audience is treated to the distressing sight in which the bloated, semi-automated corpse of Mae West waddles around a film that is equal parts a bad comedy relying on jokes that were ancient even when the film star was young, and a crappy musical with songs that are cyanide to the eardrums. And I don't think he liked it, do you?
But other critics were less kind.
Exactly, yes, it's true, they were. Here's Rex Reed. Most pathetic is seeing her enter in full bridal regalia, the groom at her side. He looks 25, she looks like something they found in the basement of a pyramid. Do you want to do one?
Yes, please. There's a very...
go on, there's
actually there's a really unpleasant line, actually. I think this is Rex Reed, who was a famous caustic critic in America. And he's quoting on one of the laugh lines. So it's the one we mentioned already. How do you like it in London? She says, I like it anywhere. She drools, her left eye taking a look at her right eye, because she has a slightly lazy eye, unfortunately. Well, she is 84, for goodness sake.
He continues, the music starts and Mae has to clear out of the way, manoeuvring with the agility of an ocean liner in a fish pond as the lobby bursts into Hollywood.
That's hooray for Hollywood.
We also heard it from Vincent Canby, who was the New York Times film reviewer. Sextette is a disorientating freak show. It is a poetic, terrifying reminder of how a virtually disembodied ego can survive total physical decay and loss of common sense. The character we see in this peculiar film looks less like the Mae West one remembers from even Myra Breckenridge,
which is the last film she made about 5 years ago,
indeed,
10 years ago.
Than like a plump sheep that's been stood on its hind legs, dressed in a drag queen's idea of chic, bewigged and then smeared with pink plaster. The creature inside this get-up seems game, but arthritic and perplexed. And then, finally, another review. The creepiest monster movie of the year to date must certainly be Sextette, in which we are presented with the bizarre sight of the 87-year-old, seemingly arthritic Mae West tottering around as she mouths some of the better-known one-liners and pretends to be the kind of sex object that drives men to suicide. When Mae was a kid, in her 40s, say, one could say that she was parodying sex. When she's in her 80s, the spectacle suggests some kinky variation on necrophilia.
They weren't very nice,
They didn't
were
hold
they,
back,
children?
did they? They didn't spare her feelings. And she didn't live a lot longer, did she?
No, it was 2 years.
It was just
she
another
died
2
in
years.
1980.
Yes, so I fear that...
But
this was a sad...
it was good for her ego, because one of the nice things about it is that on the opening night, all her, say, young fans came out in droves.
Oh,
and
right,
actually,
okay.
she felt really loved. So although the reviews were absolutely appalling,
There she was.
she thought that the real people...
In a haze of temazepam.
Well, no, but in a way, I think that's nice, because that, in a way...
Yes.
Let's face it, at the end of the day, we are still talking about it
when
30 years later.
When someone makes their biopic of Mae West, if they haven't done so already, and I'm sure there'll be another anyway, of course they'll be able to do this. They'll be able to flash back from that one night where she is as arthritic old lady and into her glory days, I imagine.
Isn't it called Iron Lady?
Oh, yes.
Meryl Streep.
Oh, yes. Actually, there are some interesting parallels, aren't there? I wonder if Mrs. Thatcher's considered doing a musical at this stage of her existence. I think she could be jolly good.
There are, it ought to be said, a couple of continuity errors.
Right.
We've already mentioned the tapping on the carpet.
Yes.
There's a very visible microphone in one scene, in the hotel gymnasium where the javelin player is. But the best one, of course, is that for... So Michael Barrington decides he's got to retrieve the cassette, which by now is stuck in the gargoyle's mouth on the very top of the building.
This line we mentioned earlier.
So we get all this Darings Do stuff,
Yeah.
where he clings to the side of the building and looks down every now and then at the street below, cuts to stock footage of cars travelling on a London road. However, once he's got the cassette, instead of climbing back up again, he decides to jump from where he is.
He does, that's right.
Through a window, where he then lands on the trampoline. And then
Well, that's how he gets up there as well, don't forget.
But the problem is there's a continuity error between the cut to his instant possible death if he were to fall because it's a street.
Yes.
And in fact, actually in front of him must be the skylight to a lower gymnasium.
Oh, yes, that's true, yes.
On the trampoline. Yes.
Oh, well,
it's
anyway.
all very minor stuff, but it's...
yes, and pales into insignificance next to the entire massive folly that the film itself is. Indeed. Well, it's a very fun movie. What is there anything else we need to cover before we...
Well, just a couple of things. I just a few resonances. When you study Mae West a bit, you discover a few things. Now, we mentioned Ian Whitcomb as the man who rewrote some of the lyrics to Happy Birthday 16. Of course, the rhyme for 21 is different from 16.
Yes.
So he has to come up with a splendid line. You're the biggest boy under the sun. Happy birthday 21.
Gracious.
But Ian Whitcomb, as I say, wrote one great pop hit of the 1960s, which was called You Turn Me On.
Right.
It's a mod classic, actually, it's considered to be. But he wrote lots of other songs. There's one called Nervous as well. Now, did you know that when Mae West was a mere 72, she became the oldest woman to ever have a solo album on the Billboard Hot 200 chart.
Wow.
A record that was kept until until 2011, when Wanda Jackson beat her at 73 with The Party's Not Over.
Oh, okay.
So that record lasted nearly 30 years.
That's pretty good
very
going,
impressive.
Yes. Can't argue with
and
that.
this album was called... It's a rock and roll album. It's called Way Out West.
Oh, yes.
There we are. And their covers are pop songs. Now, this is Mae West always looking to the future and not looking back, although she reuses her old material. This is 10 covers. So you've got Treat Him Right, When a Man Loves a Woman, Shaking All Over, Bob Dylan's If You Got to Go. You've got Day Tripper, another Beatles number. There's Twist and Shout, which was clearly beyond her abilities at that stage.
Although presumably if she did one, she had to do the other, one imagines.
Later on in the 1970s, she recorded another album called Great Balls of Fire, and she covered The Doors.
Wow.
And she had one further album.
I'm starting to agree with this reviewer about the disembodied ego thing.
She did a Christmas collection of...
It's frankly Shatner-esque echoes in all of this, I think, you know.
Yeah. But she was still doing it. But what I think is interesting that she was covering contemporary songs. So
Yes.
she was trying to be of the time. She did an album called Wild Christmas in the late 1960s.
I think we should seriously be getting hold of these albums. I would actually like to hear her doing Twist and Shout and just see how it sounds.
How long we last.
Yes.
And she also, at the Academy Award ceremony in 1958, so she was still merely in her 60s,
yes.
She sang Baby It's Cold Outside by Frank Lesser with Rock Hudson, of
well,
all people.
that I can...
Yeah, that's
that,
a camp
that I can
masterpiece,
believe.
but in 1958 no one would have realised or appreciated it. But the thing about it is, on this album, you know, with Bob Dylan and the Beatles and John Lee Hooker and all these people... there are 2 songs by Ian Whitcomb.
Right.
And Ian Whitcomb is the man who's also brought in to write the lyrics of the song.
Yes,
so there's a connection there. I think that's clear. The other thing about it we've said is that the gymnastics thing, where she's surrounded by...
muscly men.
Well, they start off in vests and they all end up in sort of American Stars and Stripes posing...
yes,
sort
of thing, yes.
Well, posing trunks, really.
Yep.
They're all muscle men except for the 21-year-old. Now, I think I mentioned that she had a brief fling with the black chap for whom she built bought the building. Well, his name was William Jones, and he was a boxing champ in the old-style big-chested boxing. His real name, he went under the performance of Gorilla Jones, and they had an affair. But actually, Mae West found her long-lasting true love when she was 61.
Right.
She genuinely was a sexually active woman into her late life.
Yeah.
When she became romantically involved with one of the muscle men, he was a Mr. California, who she'd hired to provide beefcake in her Las Vegas shows, her live shows.
Oh, okay.
So at 61, she was doing these sort of Las Vegas shows,
makes sense, yeah.
glitz. She had naked or near naked men glistening up, and she fell for one. And his name was Chester Rybonsky. Changed his name to Paul Novak rather later on.
Right.
And she was 30 years older than he was, so he must have been 31 at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And they moved in with each other, and they stayed together until she died at 87 in 1980.
Oh, that's nice to know.
So what I like about it, first of all, it's a good, successful relationship. But secondly, it goes to show that she had the muscle man part, because that's not a look that people find attractive anymore. That's a much older... The broad chest thing is a much more... Yeah, but it used to be ubiquitous as the figure of male beauty in the 50s. Yeah. By this stage, it was dying out, so it's a little bit backwards, as it were. But she had this taste. She used it on her stage show, and she clearly incorporated that into... You know, this team doesn't look anything like a gymnastics team. No. And they've some of them have got that 80s and 70s look of having moustaches, which looks very retrospectively gay now.
Yes.
So there are interesting resonances with other things that were going on in her life at the time, which seem to have been interpolated. And as she wrote the screenplay...
Well, I was going to say, she co-wrote it, didn't she? And
she wrote the play, and then, yes, it was adapted into a film.
As a screenplay. Well, there we are. That's Sextette for you, and what an extraordinary piece of work it is. What I do recommend is, of course, one can only communicate so much about it by talking about it. What you can find, I understand, Your Honour, is that there are clips of it. Some are up on YouTube, and should you desire to experience either Babyface or Timothy Dalton singing
Love Will Keep Us Together,
a Captain and Tennille hit, exactly, by Neil Sedaka, then yes, that's something that, well, I can't recommend it enough. It'll put a smile on your face. And if it doesn't, you have a heart of stone.
Do we want to finish with the final sexual innuendo laugh line of the piece?
Well, it's not so much of an innuendo, really, is it? As a sort of sample entendre.
Yes, it is just the one entendre.
He's there on his yacht, isn't he?
He's stormed off.
Yes, and then he says he's singing sort of fitfully, as it were, or
love will keep us together. To a photograph,
exactly. Desultorily, I suppose, is what I mean. And then she happens to be just perched on the bed.
Somehow
put there by a forklift truck shortly beforehand. They started filming
through the cargo hold on ropes,
and he hears her voice, and he's finally ready to leap into the bed with her. Something we thankfully don't see, as I suspect it would have resulted in several fractures. And
he makes a reference to Paul Revere.
That's right.
Who warned the American rebel troops at the British Army's approach.
Very famous for being quite quick. And she says, "The British are coming.
I look forward to being able to say."
Yes, that's right. The British are coming. That's right. And they roll the credits, and the whole thing
collapses under its own weight.
Exactly. And that's Sextette. And as Musical Talk's latest episode does exactly the same thing, I have to thank you very much, Thos Ribbits, for joining me.
It's a pleasure. I've enjoyed both the tet and the sex.
Yes, indeed. And I thank... Good grief. And I would like to thank myself for sticking through to the end of this episode. And I'd like to thank you, dear listener, for doing the same. That is all from Musical Talk this week. We may see you again, hopefully. Goodbye.
Goodbye. Musical Talk, the UK independent musical theatre podcast. This episode of Musical Talk produced and edited by Thos Ribbits. It was presented by Tim Saywood and Thos Ribbits. Copyright Musical Talk 2012. Musical Outtalks.
Mae West. We have another particularly camp scene within. There's a bunch of muscle Marys, basically, who are sort of a sports team, a very camp sort of sports team, who are, for reasons best known to the plot,
training in the gym in the hotel.
Simply, I think, as far as I can tell, in order that the cassette, which is the sort of MacGuffin of the plot, that has to be recaptured.
It's got her memoirs on,
she had 6 former husbands, and or 5.
He's had 5 former. He's number 6.
That's
Sir
right.
Michael.
Yeah, and
but they all happen to be ambassadors and leaders.
And her
of
memoirs
countries.
have international implications. Oh, sorry. Hello.
We on?
So what was the song we talked about before that?
Well, we started with Love Will Keep Us Together, then we went to Hooray for Hollywood.
Right, okay. Hello.